What if your small garden is not actually too small? What if it is simply growing the wrong plants? That one question can change the way you look at every container, every raised bed, every narrow strip beside a fence, and every sunny corner on a patio. Because when space is limited, every plant has to earn its place. If one plant takes over a whole pot, drinks water every day, needs constant attention, and gives you only one tiny harvest, you feel it. You see the empty space, you feel the wasted time, and after a while, gardening starts to feel harder than it needs to be. But a small garden can also become surprisingly productive when you choose plants that match the way you actually live. Plants that keep giving. Plants that forgive a busy week. Plants that grow upward instead of outward. Plants you can cut and come back to again. Plants that turn a few containers into something useful, fresh, and alive. This is not about growing everything. They see a seed rack, get excited, and try to fit an entire farm into 6 pots. A better goal is simpler. Grow the vegetables that give the most value for the space, water, and attention you can honestly provide. So in this video, we are going through 14 low-maintenance vegetables that can help a small garden produce more food with less work, less wasted work. These are plants for gardeners with limited space, limited time, and a very real desire to harvest something useful. By the end, you should be able to look at one small corner of your garden and know exactly which plants deserve to be there. Before we talk about the first plant, there is one important idea to keep in mind. Low maintenance does not mean no maintenance. It means the plant rewards the small things you do correctly. A layer of mulch, a container that is not too tiny, a simple trellis installed before the vines get tangled, a habit of harvesting young leaves or tender pods before they become tough. In other words, the garden becomes easier when the plant and the place agree with each other. A heat-loving crop goes into the hottest sun. A cool season green gets the gentler part of the year. A runner gets a boundary. A vine gets a trellis. A thirsty container gets mulch or more soil volume. None of this is fancy, but it is the difference between a garden that constantly asks for rescue and a garden that quietly supports you. The best small garden vegetables usually fall into a few groups. Some are tough, warm season plants that keep going when the summer sun gets strong. Some are cut and come again crops where you harvest leaves or stems and the plant keeps growing. Some are fast crops that give beginners an early win. Some are herbs that do not take much room but make every meal taste more like it came from the garden. And some are compact producers that simply make sense in a raised bed or container. The first vegetable is one of the clearest examples of a plant that earns its place when the weather gets hot: okra. Okra is not the plant you grow because it looks delicate. It is the plant you grow when summer starts testing everything else. In many warm parts of the United States, when lettuce starts to struggle, when cool season greens begin to bolt, and when tender plants look tired by afternoon, okra often stands there like it was waiting for the heat all along. For a small garden, that matters. A plant that can handle heat is valuable because summer is when many gardeners lose momentum. You may start the season with enthusiasm, but once the days get long and the containers dry quickly, anything that needs constant rescue becomes frustrating. Okra is different when it has the basics: full sun, warm soil, decent drainage, and enough root space. One of the reasons okra works well in limited space is its shape. It grows more upright than sprawling. That means it can fit into a sunny raised bed or a large container without covering everything around it. The care is simple, but the setup matters. Do not force okra into a tiny pot and then blame the plant for struggling. Give it a deep container, a grow bag, or a spot in a warm raised bed. Add mulch around the base once the soil has warmed, especially in containers, because mulch slows down drying and reduces the number of times you have to rush outside with a watering can. The harvest is also part of the low-maintenance strategy. Pick okra pods when they are still young and tender. If you leave them too long, they can become tough and woody, and the plant may slow down because it is putting energy into mature pods. Okra is a good choice for gardeners who have sun, heat, and a little patience at the beginning. It may not be the fastest plant on the list, but once it settles in, it can become one of the strongest summer anchors in a small food garden. But if okra gives you height and heat tolerance, the next plant gives you color, flavor, and a long harvest from one compact space: peppers. Peppers are one of the most useful small garden crops because one healthy plant can make a container feel productive for a long time. Whether you grow sweet peppers, lunchbox peppers, jalapenos, shishitos, banana peppers, or another type you actually like to cook with, the important thing is this: peppers do not need a huge bed to feel worthwhile. They need warmth, sun, steady moisture, and a container or bed that gives their roots enough room. In a small garden, peppers have a visual payoff too. Green leaves, glossy fruit, and eventually red, orange, yellow, purple, or dark green peppers can make even a patio garden feel alive. But peppers are only low maintenance if you avoid making their life harder. The biggest mistake is putting them in a container that is too small. A tiny pot dries quickly, heats up fast, and gives the plant less room to support fruit. Another mistake is watering in an uneven pattern. Bone dry one day, soaked the next. Peppers prefer consistency. You do not have to fuss over them every hour, but a larger container, mulch, and a simple watering rhythm will do more than constant panic watering. If you want to use space even more efficiently, peppers can often share a large container with a smaller companion like basil, as long as the pot is not overcrowded and both plants still get light and airflow. In a raised bed, peppers can stand in the middle while low-growing herbs or green onions use the edges. This is the kind of layering that makes a small garden work harder without looking chaotic. Harvesting peppers depends on the type and the flavor you want. Some can be picked green, others develop more sweetness or heat as they color. The low-maintenance lesson is to keep checking the plant gently and harvest before it becomes overloaded. A small plant carrying too much fruit can slow down, especially early in the season. Sometimes taking a few peppers at the right time helps the plant keep producing. A pepper plant may grow slowly at first, but once it settles in, it can make a small garden feel much more useful. It is not a plant to ignore completely. It is a plant to set up well, keep evenly watered, and let it reward you over time. Now, let's move from fruiting plants to one of the smartest ways to get more food from less ground: beans that climb. The next vegetable is yardlong beans. When the ground is limited, vertical plants can make your garden feel like it gained a second floor. Yardlong beans are a perfect example. Instead of spreading across the surface of the bed, they can climb a trellis, fence, cattle panel, balcony railing, or simple string support. That is exactly what a small garden needs: plants that use airspace, not just soil space. Yardlong beans are especially useful in warm weather. They are often grown where summers are hot, and they can produce long, tender pods when conditions are right. For a gardener with a small backyard, a sunny patio, or a narrow raised bed, the visual transformation can be dramatic. One day, the trellis looks empty, then vines begin to climb, then flowers appear, then long pods hang down where there used to be unused vertical space. The low maintenance part starts before planting. Put the support in early. Do not wait until the vines are already tangled and reaching for everything nearby. If the plant knows where to go, you do not have to keep untangling it from peppers, basil, lettuce, or anything else growing close by. Yardlong beans also teach an important small garden rule: harvest young and often. The pods are usually best when they are still flexible and tender. If you leave them too long, they can become tougher, and the plant shifts more energy toward mature seed. A quick walk through the garden every couple of days with a small basket or even just your hand can keep the plant in production mode. The mistake is letting the vines become a green knot. In a small garden, a messy vine can shade smaller plants, block airflow, and make harvesting annoying. But trained upward, yardlong beans become one of the most space-efficient crops in the whole garden. They bring food, height, and movement without asking for a large footprint. And if you like the idea of a tough bean for hot weather, the next one may be even more forgiving: cowpeas. Cowpeas are the kind of plant that remind you low-maintenance gardening is not about doing nothing. It is about choosing crops that are naturally tougher. In many warm climates, cowpeas have a reputation for handling heat better than many common garden vegetables. For busy gardeners, that toughness can be the difference between a garden that collapses in summer and a garden that still has something useful growing. For small spaces, the key is choosing the right type. Some cowpeas grow more like bushes. Some are more vining or semi-vining. That means you should read the seed packet before planting and plan the space honestly. If you choose a vining type, give it support. If you choose a bush type, give it enough room so it does not smother nearby seedlings. Cowpeas can be grown for tender pods, fresh peas, or dry peas, depending on the variety and how you like to cook. But for a small food garden, young pods and fresh harvests often give the quickest sense of value. The care is usually not complicated. Give cowpeas sun, warm soil, and drainage. Avoid overfeeding with high nitrogen fertilizer, because too much leafy growth is not always what you want when you are trying to harvest pods. Mulch helps, especially if your garden dries fast. And as with other pod crops, picking at the right stage keeps the harvest more useful. The mistake to avoid is treating all cowpeas the same. A compact type and a vining type behave differently. A small garden does not forgive that kind of confusion. If a plant wants to climb, support it. If it wants to bush out, give it air. The more you match the plant's habit to the space, the less work you create later. Now that we have heat and height covered, let's talk about the plants that give a small garden its secret weapon: cut and come again harvests. The first is Swiss chard. In a small garden, a plant that lets you harvest from it again and again is often more valuable than a plant that gives you one big moment and then disappears. Swiss chard is a beautiful example. It does not need to take over the whole garden to be useful. A few healthy plants in a raised bed or a deep container can give you leaves over a long period when you harvest them correctly. Swiss chard has another advantage. It looks abundant. The leaves are broad, the stems can be colorful, and even a small planting can make a garden look full. The maintenance method is simple. Do not pull the whole plant unless you are finished with it. Harvest the outer leaves, leaving the center to keep growing. Take what you need, let the plant recover, and come back later. This style of harvesting turns one planting into multiple meals instead of one harvest. Swiss chard also fits well into the rhythm of a busy gardener. You do not need to harvest a perfect basket every time. A few leaves can go into eggs, soup, pasta, stir-fries, or a quick side dish. The mistakes are common but easy to avoid. Do not crowd the plants so tightly that the leaves stay damp and air cannot move. Do not let old outer leaves sit forever and block light from younger growth. Do not cut into the growing center if you want the plant to continue. And in containers, do not let the pot dry out completely again and again, because big leaves lose moisture fast. Swiss chard is not magic. It still needs light, water, and decent soil. But it is forgiving enough, productive enough, and beautiful enough to deserve a place in many small gardens. The next leafy green works in a similar way, but it brings a different strength to cooler seasons and small garden beds. Kale. Kale is one of those vegetables that can be either easy or frustrating depending on when and how you grow it. Sometimes a vegetable is not difficult. It is just being asked to grow in the wrong season. Kale generally prefers cooler weather, and that matters for gardeners in the United States because summer conditions can be very different from one region to another. In a small garden, kale is valuable because you do not need to harvest the whole plant at once. Like Swiss chard, it can be harvested leaf by leaf. Take the older outer leaves, leave the growing center, and the plant can continue producing. This makes kale far more useful in a small space than crops that demand one big harvest and then leave a gap. Kale works well in raised beds, grow bags, and larger containers. It can stand near the back or middle of a bed, while smaller crops use the edges. In cooler months, it can be one of the plants that keeps the garden productive when warm season crops are gone. In warmer climates, it may need careful timing: morning sun, afternoon shade, or a cooler season planting window. The low-maintenance approach is to stop fighting the plant's nature. Do not plant kale in the hottest, harshest part of summer and then decide it is a bad crop. Grow it when the weather helps you. Give it enough space for airflow. Mulch around it to keep soil moisture more stable. Check the undersides of leaves now and then, because leafy greens can attract pests. You do not have to obsess over it, but a quick check during harvest can save trouble later. Kale also has a strong psychological benefit for new gardeners. It looks sturdy. It gives visible leaves. It can be harvested gradually. The mistake is cutting the top out of the plant too early, or stripping every leaf at once. If you want repeat harvests, treat the plant like a living pantry, not a one-time crop. Take a little, leave enough, and come back again. And if you want something even simpler, something you can tuck into edges and harvest in small handfuls, green onions may be one of the easiest wins. Green onions prove that not every productive plant has to be large. Some of the best small garden crops are the ones you can fit almost anywhere, along the edge of a raised bed, in a narrow container, around the side of a larger pot, near herbs, beside leafy greens, in the little spaces that would otherwise sit empty. That is why green onions are so useful for small gardens. They do not demand a huge footprint, and they are easy to use in real meals. A few snips can go into soup, eggs, noodles, salads, tacos, fried rice, or almost anything savory. This kind of crop may not look dramatic, but it makes the garden useful more often. The simplest way to harvest green onions is to cut the green tops and leave the base to regrow, as long as the plant is healthy and conditions are good. You can also pull whole plants when you want them, but in a low-maintenance garden, the cut and regrow method gives you more value from the same small planting. They like steady moisture, decent light, and soil that is not completely neglected. They do not want to be buried under aggressive neighbors or shaded so deeply they become weak. But compared with many vegetables, they are easy to tuck in and easy to manage. Green onions are also great for gardeners who get overwhelmed. You can simply step outside, cut a few stems, and feel like the garden gave you something today. The mistake is pulling every plant too soon when all you needed was a handful of leaves. Another mistake is forgetting them at the edge until weeds or larger plants take over. Give them a visible edge, keep the soil lightly moist, and they can become one of the most dependable small space crops you grow. Now, let's look at a plant that grows so generously, you may start using the leaves more than the roots. Sweet potato leaves. Many gardeners think of sweet potatoes only as a root crop, but the leaves and tender vine tips can also be used as greens in many kitchens. For a warm, small garden, that makes sweet potato plants interesting. They can grow with energy, cover soil, and offer leafy harvests when some cool season greens are no longer happy. But this plant comes with a space warning. Sweet potato vines can be generous, and generous plants can become messy if you put them in the wrong place. In a small garden, you do not want a vine covering your peppers, shading your lettuce, and crawling through your basil. You want that growth where it helps. A large grow bag, a container near the edge of a patio, or a controlled corner of a raised bed can work better than the middle of a crowded garden. The idea is to give the vines a direction. Let them spill over a container. Let them cover a bare patch. Let them provide edible leaves without stealing light from smaller crops. Harvesting is simple. Take tender leaves or young vine tips and do not strip the plant bare. Like other repeat harvest crops, the goal is to take some and leave enough for continued growth. If you are also trying to grow roots, be more thoughtful about how much foliage you remove, because the leaves are feeding the plant. If your main goal is greens, you can manage it more like a leafy vine. The low maintenance advantage is that once sweet potato vines are established in warm weather, they often grow with less fuss than many tender greens. They still need water, especially in containers, but they do not have the same cool weather personality as lettuce or arugula. The mistake is planting them without a plan. A vigorous plant in a tiny garden can create work if it is always in the way. But placed well, sweet potato leaves can make a small garden look full, productive, and alive very quickly. After all these leafy harvests, the next two plants add something different: fragrance, flavor, and instant value in the kitchen. Let's start with basil. Basil is one of the easiest plants to underestimate because one small harvest can change the flavor of an entire meal. In a small garden, that kind of value matters. You may not have room for rows and rows of crops, but you probably have room for a basil plant. And if you use basil in pasta, salads, sandwiches, soups, pesto, or summer dishes, one plant can feel surprisingly generous. Basil loves warmth, sun, and soil that drains well. It grows beautifully in containers, along the edge of a raised bed, or near other warm season crops if there is enough room. Many gardeners like growing basil near peppers or tomatoes. But the important thing is not the romance of companion planting. The important thing is that each plant still has light, airflow, and root space. The key to low-maintenance basil is harvesting correctly. Do not just pluck one random leaf here and there forever. Cut the stem above a pair of leaves or above a node so the plant can branch. This encourages a bushier plant instead of one tall, skinny stem. The more you harvest thoughtfully, the more useful the plant becomes. Another important habit is to prevent flowering too early if your goal is tender leaves. Once basil begins to flower, the flavor and growth pattern may change. You do not have to panic, but regular pinching and harvesting can keep the plant focused on leafy growth longer. Basil works especially well for busy gardeners because a small harvest has a big kitchen impact. That is a form of productivity too. Sometimes the best small space plants are the ones you actually use. The mistake is letting basil become tall, woody, and flowered while you wait for a big harvest. Basil rewards regular attention, but the attention is pleasant and quick. A few seconds of cutting can shape the plant and give you dinner at the same time. But the next herb needs one important warning before you plant it anywhere near the rest of your garden. Mint. Mint is low maintenance in a pot, but it can become high maintenance if you plant it where it is free to run. That is the most important thing to understand. Mint is tough, fragrant, useful, and often very forgiving. But those same strengths can become a problem in a shared raised bed or open garden soil. For a small garden, mint is wonderful when contained. Put it in its own pot. Give it a spot where it can grow without invading everything else. Harvest it for tea, water, sauces, salads, desserts, or garnish. Cut stems regularly to keep it bushy. If it gets tired or leggy, trimming can help refresh the plant. Mint is especially satisfying for beginners because it responds quickly. You can cut a handful and still see the plant recover. It makes the garden feel abundant even when other crops are between harvests. But do not confuse easy growth with easy placement. A mint plant in the wrong spot may send runners through the bed and create more work than it saves. This is why container growing is the low-maintenance choice. The pot becomes the boundary. The boundary keeps the plant useful instead of annoying. Mint does not need the same kind of rich attention as some vegetables, but it still appreciates water, especially in a container during warm weather. If the pot dries completely for too long, the plant can suffer. A slightly larger container and some mulch on top can reduce that problem. The mistake is planting mint directly into your best small raised bed with your vegetables and hoping it behaves. Mint is not rude, it is just mint. Give it its own space, and it can be one of the easiest, most rewarding plants in your small garden. Now, let's move into the quick crops, the plants that give new gardeners small wins before they lose motivation. The first is arugula. Fast crops matter in a small garden because they keep the space moving instead of sitting empty. Arugula is a great example. Arugula works especially well when you sow small amounts at a time. Instead of planting a giant patch all at once, sprinkle a short row or a small section of a container. Then, a little later, sow another small section. This keeps the garden from giving you too much at once and then nothing afterward. The best way to enjoy arugula in a low-maintenance small garden is often as young leaves. Cut baby greens when they are tender, and let the planting give you quick salads or sandwich greens. In the right conditions, you may get regrowth, but it is better to think of arugula as a fast-moving crop rather than a permanent one. Season matters. Arugula generally prefers cooler weather. In hot conditions, it can become stronger, sharper, and quicker to bolt. That does not make it a bad plant. The mistake is sowing too much, waiting too long, and ending up with a bed of tough, flowering greens you do not want to eat. In a small garden, timing is part of low maintenance. Smaller sowings are easier to harvest, easier to use, and easier to replace. Arugula gives you speed, and speed has value. When you are new to gardening, waiting months for everything can be discouraging. A quick handful of greens reminds you that the garden is working, and if arugula gives you speed, lettuce gives you one of the most familiar ways to keep fresh leaves close to the kitchen. Lettuce can be easy or difficult depending on the type, the weather, and the way you harvest it. For small gardens, loose leaf lettuce is usually more useful than large head lettuce. Instead of waiting for one full head, you can harvest outer leaves or baby leaves and keep the planting useful over time. This is important because a small garden needs flexibility. A window box, shallow container, fabric grow bag, or the edge of a raised bed can all hold lettuce when conditions are right. You do not need a huge area. You need a cool enough spot, steady moisture, and a plan to harvest before the leaves become stressed. Lettuce is not always a low-maintenance crop in the heat. In many areas, hot weather can make it bolt, turn bitter, or wilt quickly. But in the right season, or with morning sun and some afternoon shade, lettuce can become one of the easiest small space wins. This is why it is important to match crops to seasons instead of forcing the same plant all year. The low-maintenance method is succession and small harvests. Sow a little, harvest young, sow again. Or plant a few starts and pick outer leaves instead of cutting everything at once. Keep the soil evenly moist, because shallow-rooted greens suffer when containers dry out completely. Mulch can help if the container is deep enough, and shade cloth can help in warmer conditions. The mistake is treating lettuce like a summer pepper. It is not. Lettuce has a cooler personality. Respect that, and it becomes easier. Ignore that, and it turns into a frustrating crop that seems to fail for no reason. For a small garden near the kitchen, lettuce is valuable because it changes everyday meals. A few fresh leaves can make a sandwich, wrap, taco, or salad feel homegrown. You do not need a giant harvest for lettuce to matter. You just need enough leaves at the right moment. The next crop is even faster, and it can help you use the little gaps that other plants leave behind. Radish. Radishes are not here because they produce forever. They are here because they teach you how powerful a quick crop can be in a small space. For small gardens, radishes are useful because they fit in gaps. A short row along the edge of a bed. A small patch between slower plants while those plants are still young. A container that is not being used for a long season crop yet. Radishes can turn temporary empty space into food. They also teach good gardening habits. You learn to sow thinly or thin seedlings early. You learn that roots need loose soil, not hard compacted dirt. You learn that steady moisture matters. You learn that waiting too long can make a quick crop less pleasant. Radishes generally prefer cooler weather. In heat, they may become woody, extra spicy, or quick to flower. So again, this is not about forcing a plant to be low maintenance in the wrong season. It is about using the plant where it naturally wants to succeed. The care is simple. Give radishes loose soil, enough light, even moisture, and enough space for the roots to form. If the seedlings are crowded, thin them. If the soil dries out and then floods, growth can suffer. If you forget them too long, quality can drop. But when you plant small batches and harvest on time, radishes can be one of the most satisfying quick wins in the garden. The mistake is planting a huge amount all at once. Then they mature together, and suddenly you have more radishes than you want for a few days, and none later. Smaller successions are better. In a small garden, rhythm matters more than volume. And now, to finish the list, let's come back to one of the most practical crops for gardeners who want real harvests without complicated care. Bush beans. Bush beans are simple, but in a small garden, simple is not a weakness. Simple is often exactly what keeps you gardening. Unlike climbing beans, bush beans do not need a tall trellis. They grow in a compact shape, which makes them easier to fit into a raised bed, a container, or a sunny corner where you want food without building a big structure. For beginners, bush beans are satisfying because the plant is easy to understand. It grows, flowers, forms pods, and gives you something recognizable to pick. For busy gardeners, the care is manageable. Sun, decent soil, regular moisture, and enough spacing for airflow. The harvest window is not endless, so if you want beans for longer, think in small successions. Plant one round, then another round later, if your season allows. This is more useful than planting everything at once and getting one short wave of harvest. Pick the pods when they are young and tender. If you leave too many to mature, the plant may slow down and the beans may become less pleasant to eat. A quick harvest every few days during production can keep the crop useful. The mistakes are crowding, wet leaves, and neglecting harvest. Crowded bean plants can have poor airflow. Watering overhead late in the day can leave leaves damp. Waiting too long to pick pods reduces quality. Bush beans are not the flashiest crop in the garden, but they are practical, compact, and generous enough to deserve consideration. If you have a small raised bed and you want something straightforward, they can be one of the easiest ways to turn sunlight into dinner. Now, the real question is not which one of these plants is best. The real question is how to combine them without making your small garden crowded. You do not need to grow all 14 at once. In fact, most small gardens should not try. The goal is not to squeeze every plant into one bed. The goal is to give each plant a job, so the whole garden works with less effort. Think of your garden in layers and seasons. In the warm season, your sunny anchor plants might be okra, peppers, basil, cowpeas, yardlong beans, and sweet potato leaves. These are the plants that can help carry the garden when the weather is too warm for delicate greens. In the cooler season, the garden can shift toward kale, lettuce, arugula, radish, and maybe Swiss chard, depending on your climate. Green onions can slip into edges. Mint stays in its own pot. Bush beans can fill a sunny block when you want a compact crop. If you have one raised bed, place the taller or trellis plants toward the back or north side, so they do not shade everything else. Yardlong beans or a vining cowpea can climb there. Peppers can sit where they receive sun and airflow. Swiss chard or kale can take a steady spot where you can harvest outer leaves. Green onions can line the edge. Radishes and arugula can fill short-term gaps before larger plants need the space. If you garden mostly in containers, think by pot size and plant habit. A large container can hold a pepper, with basil nearby if there is enough room. A separate pot should hold mint. A deep grow bag can hold okra or sweet potato vines. A long window box can hold lettuce or arugula in cooler weather. A medium container can grow bush beans. A trellis container can hold yard-long beans, as long as the support is sturdy enough. The easiest way to reduce work is to stop using containers that are too small for thirsty plants. Tiny pots create tiny root systems and big watering problems. Bigger containers dry out more slowly, buffer temperature better, and give plants a chance to handle a busy gardener's schedule. If you are often away during the day, self-watering containers can be especially useful for greens, herbs, and peppers. Mulch is another quiet helper. A thin layer around established plants can reduce evaporation, soften soil temperature swings, and keep the surface from crusting. This is also why copying another gardener's exact layout does not always work. Their climate, containers, soil, and schedule may be different from yours. The better approach is to copy the principle, not the picture. Put strong summer crops where summer is strongest. Put quick crops where space opens and closes. Put herbs where you will actually harvest them. Let your small garden become a system, not just a collection of plants. Spacing is just as important. Small space gardening does not mean cramming plants together until they suffer. It means using space intelligently. A crowded garden may look full for a week, but then airflow drops. Leaves stay damp, roots compete, and harvesting becomes annoying. A well-planned garden looks full because each plant has room to do its job. Harvest rhythm is the final piece. Low-maintenance vegetables often become more productive when you harvest them regularly. Pick beans young. Cut basil before it flowers heavily. Take outer leaves from chard and kale. Snip green onions instead of pulling them all. Harvest lettuce and arugula young. Pull radishes on time. This is the pleasant work of gardening, and it is what turns plants into food. A small garden becomes easier when you stop asking every plant to do the same thing. Okra and peppers anchor the heat. Yard-long beans and some cowpeas use vertical space. Swiss chard, kale, green onions, and sweet potato leaves give repeat harvests. Basil and mint add flavor. Arugula, lettuce, and radish keep the garden moving quickly. Bush beans offer compact, practical harvests. And once you see your garden this way, the final lesson becomes very simple. You do not need a bigger garden to grow more food. You need plants that match your space, your schedule, and the way you actually garden. If you only have a patio, start with a few containers. Maybe one pepper, one pot of basil, one pot of mint kept separate, a small box of lettuce in cool weather, and some green onions tucked along the edge. If you have one raised bed, choose one climbing crop, one leafy green, one fast crop, one herb, and one warm season anchor. If you have a sunny fence, use it. If you have a shaded corner, save it for crops that appreciate relief from heat. If your summers are intense, do not fight them with the wrong plants. Grow the crops that can handle them. You do not have to plant all 14 vegetables to succeed. Choose 3 to 5 that fit your season and your meals. A garden full of food you do not eat is not productive. A small garden with a few plants you use every week is far more valuable. So the next time you look at a small space and think it is not enough, ask a better question. Not, how can I fit more plants here? Ask, which plants will give the most back without asking for more than I can give? That question is where low-maintenance gardening really begins. Not with neglect. Not with shortcuts that ignore the needs of the plant, but with better choices. Bigger containers where they matter. Mulch where the soil dries too fast. Trellises where vines want to climb. Cooler spots for cool season greens. Separate pots for plants that run. Regular harvests that keep the garden alive. A small garden can be quiet, simple, and generous. It can be a few containers outside the kitchen door. It can be one raised bed beside a driveway. It can be a patio corner with herbs, peppers, greens, and beans reaching upward. It does not have to impress anyone. It only has to serve your life. Grow what earns its space. Harvest in small, steady moments. Let the easy plants do more of the work, and your small garden may start giving you more food with less stress than you expected.